Wounded but Not Broken, with host Patrick Scroggins. As a U.S. Army attack helicopter pilot deployed in Iraq, Patrick faced a devastating crash, which resulted in him dying, losing a leg, and a slew of broken bones. Patrick's story of rehabilitation has helped others to overcome their own obstacles. Each week, Patrick recounts stories of inspiration and interviews guests who have overcome remarkable obstacles. This is Wounded but Not Broken, with your host, Patrick Scroggins.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wounded but Not Broken. Another episode, great episode here tonight. I think just post Veterans Day here. I think every day we should give a shout out to our veterans and what they sacrifice for our country, for us and our country. And I think it's just a very special day, and I hope everybody had a great weekend, and I hope in some way that you were able to touch a veteran's life or attend a veteran ceremony, because they truly are touching, and there's some great stories there. I really want to just really quick hash over the episodes that we've done, with Blaine Scott, Anthony Marquez, Eddie Corona, which he's a non-veteran, but he's devoted his life to veterans. You got Matt Amos, and then Sarah Combs is a veteran. And one huge thing that all of these people have in common are they give back. Each and every one of them are, through their own struggles, through their own trying times, are giving back to their veteran brothers and sisters. And I think that speaks a lot for the veteran community. And, with Blaine Scott, that was such a touching story, with his daughter going through bullying and unfortunately, sadly committing suicide. They're also tackling that too, and have a nonprofit to combat bullying in children. And that's such a touching thing. And I want to thank everybody that has donated to each and every one of these causes. And so tonight, I do kind of like to change it up. I like to tell a veteran story or a couple of stories, and then have somebody on that actually, interacts with veterans and impacts veterans' lives in a different way. And tonight we have a very special guest. Thor Ringler is online with us, and he's gonna talk to us about. He works on the mental health side for the VA, and he's really started a great project and organization to help veterans, and I'm going to let him talk about it. So, Thor, you want to introduce yourself, and just let's go with it.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks really for having me on the show. Just to say from the beginning that I'm not a veteran. I don't come from a military background, but ever since sort of stumbling on the VA and working with veterans, I've become really committed to telling their stories and to serving them. So I'm really honored to be on this show tonight.
Right, and so that's a very important thing that you said. You're not a veteran, but in a way you've devoted your life to help veterans, and there's a lot of people like that, and I feel like they should get just as much recognition as the veterans, because without people like you that are willing to donate their time and expertise, that just hashes over. I did a big speech on Veterans Day. And this is the greatest country on earth, and it's because of our veterans and people like you.
Thank you, Patrick. I would say that for me it's been a funny path, because my background is I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, and that's how I came to the VA. Initially, I had an internship year, and I worked at a vet center, which is a counseling center for combat veterans. It's part of the VA, but sort of separate little facilities. And I did that for a year, and just really, I guess, fell in love with the people I talked with, and really wanted to work with veterans, and I really wanted to work for the VA. So once I graduated, I started looking, and I stumbled across this job. One of my coworkers at my internship sent to me. It was a 6-month internship, and it was a pilot project, and it was called My Life, My Story. And the project was a project where we would interview veterans who might be in the hospital or maybe come in for an appointment. We'd interview them about their lives and their experiences, and then work with the veteran to make the story correct, fix whatever he or she thought needed correction, and then once the story was correct, into the medical chart so that doctors and nurses at the VA could read the story, but also so that the veteran could take copies for him or herself home and share with his or her family if they wanted to do that. And so I kind of fell off my bed when I saw that job because I'm also a writer, and so it was really inspiring to me to hear that they were trying something like that.
That's really interesting. So you have the veteran tell his story, I guess from beginning to end in the military, and like the hard stuff that they faced, or how detailed was the stories?
Yeah, so it's actually, it's longer. I would say it's longer than that. So they're actually like full life stories. So what we ask people is, we want to hear from you what do you want to share with your providers here today? What do you want them to know about you as a person? And obviously we ask people about their time in the military, and that, takes up a lot of some of the stories, but we also ask them about their childhood, growing up, their family, how they got into the military, how they chose the service they got into, what it was like when they got out, how that impacted their, education and job search later on, and then their own family and life up to kind of the moment of the interview. So it's definitely has the military component in it, but it also has other parts, big parts of other people's lives too. So.
Wow. So it's more to, I'm assuming it goes into their packet, and that goes along with them to the VA, and so the doctors and nurses are maybe a little bit more personal with them, that they can read it if they choose to. Is that right?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, and so it's the idea is that doctors and nurses can learn more about their patients rather than just being the last four and somebody with a particular illness. So I think that's totally spot on what you just said. Yep.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. So how did that when you started that project? How did the fielding for that go, or how was it received in the community?
Yeah, that's great question. Yeah, I must admit that when I started, I was really excited about it, and I knew that it would be a good thing to do, but I wasn't sure if anybody was going to talk to us because it's not something the VA has done before, and so I was a little worried when we started. It's like, is anybody going to want to talk to us in a hospital? And I'd never really spent too much time in a hospital except briefly as a patient, and I was like, I don't know if anyone's going to want to tell us their life stories. But what ends up happening, of course, is for people who have spent time in a hospital, is that there's a lot of boredom in a hospital. So, and obviously there's the treatment and all that going on, but a lot of times people are waiting for stuff to happen, and so they're actually, it's a good time for them to be interviewed in some way because they have nothing to do except wait. So a lot of people were interested in sharing their stories, which was the first big surprise. Like over half the people we approach and talk about it say yes. So that was pretty cool to find that out.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of them stories get pretty emotional and depending on the soldier.
Yes,
wow.
Exactly.
So how is that program taken in the VA? And has it kicked off really well, and it's in in motion now?
Yeah. So the program started in 2013 just with that pilot, and then that went so well that they kept me on and made me full time to run the project at the Madison VA, which is where I work, and then so it kept expanding locally, and we kept getting stories, and then we started expanding it within, kind of within the region and also within the VA. And so it started out with, I think it was like 6 different pilot sites doing the same program. And now we're up to 60 VAs that do the program. So it's grown quite a bit. Yeah.
Well, so how does it work? I'm assuming there's somebody there recording as they do. Or how do you log their story?
Yeah, so we record them, if it's okay with a veteran to record it, and we take some notes, and then from the recording and the notes from that interview, we write up the story from that, and that obviously helps us write out, working with the recording helps us write a more accurate story and really catch what they said, and and really try to capture their language too as they speak too. So.
Wow. So does the how many stories do you think you've documented to date?
Well, let's see. In Madison, we're across the whole VA, we're at like 6,200, I think, and at Madison, we're just under 3,000 right now.
Wow. What are the doctors and nurses' feedback about it? Does it help them, or do they just get excited to read them?
They do, yeah, definitely. That was one of the things we wanted to find out early on, so we surveyed, doctors and nurses about it, and, definitely just really positive feedback from them about, obviously just that feeling of getting to know more about the people they're treating, getting to know more about them as people, and just having that background. And also just sometimes, the stories just being a great way to connect with people about, oh, you lived in Oregon or something like that, Oh, I did too. So there's great points of connection, and also just obviously a way of, honoring people and what they've lived through and who they are.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I could see that being very beneficial on the civilian side too. I mean, if I was a doctor, that would be encourage that in patients. That would be pretty helpful. Just connecting on a personal level. I guess.
Yeah, you're right, and that's actually in the last couple of years. It's actually, especially out in I think in Boston and on the East Coast there's probably a dozen non-VA civilian hospitals that are doing the program now. So it's kind of spreading outside the VA too.
Wow, that's really cool. So when you started it, were you? So I'm assuming you were were you the founder of it, or were you were in the very beginning of it, I presume?
Yeah, I was in the beginning. I'd say that that initial idea, which was to what's how do we find out what? I mean, at the VA, it was sort of started in mental health, and it was started by a psychiatry resident and a couple of his mentors, and they were trying to think, what's a way that we can learn more about our patients, so we can, know more about who they are rather than just who we see, in these, 30-minute psychiatry sessions, right? And so, and that's kind of where the idea came from, and they came up on this idea of, well, let's interview people and write them and, put them in the chart. So that was their idea. Then I was brought on when they got funding to hire somebody to try it out. And I would say that I just brought my contributions to the project is just kind of the writing part of it, the format, how we do the interviews, reviewing every story with a veteran, and those are the contributions that I made to the project. Yeah.
Oh, well. So when you go, after you get the finished product, I'm sure it goes through a lot of editing and maybe does it go through multiple channels of approval or anything like that?
No, no, it doesn't. It only the only person who approves it is the veteran, actually. So we just have to review it and approve it with them. So that's the reviewer, actually. So
I got you. And then it's up to them. Do they share it to their family and friends or whoever they want to, or?
Yeah, exactly. So and so I'd say that's the other really important part of the process that's critical is that the veteran, when they're at the VA, they're in control of the story the whole time. So they can drop out of the process at any time. They can decide, I want copies for myself, but I don't want it in the medical record. That's totally fine. They can have anywhere from 1 to 100 copies that we mail to them, and that's totally up to them. And then they can decide whether they want it in the record. And we even have occasionally sometimes people come back and say, oh, I changed my mind, I don't want it in the record, and then we'll just delete it so it won't be in there. So it's really important that they have control over the story and it's theirs. So that's a huge part of it.
Wow, that's super cool. Is there any other programs like this that are on the horizon, or anything they're going to expand on?
I mean, I think that, the goal is just, my goal, I should say, and hopefully the VA is, coming along with me is, just to have this be available to every, veteran who uses VA healthcare, just have this as an option that's something that they can do. And, I think we're getting there. That's definitely my sort of vision for the project. So, and I think we'll get there.
Gotcha. I know that you mentioned your degree was in marriage and family therapy, and I know in the veteran community a lot of times it's such a struggle and such hardships on a marriage. Have you practiced any of that, or had any? Do you do any of that with the soldiers or no?
I did. When I started, I was getting my hours for licensure. So the first 2 years that I worked at the Madison VA, I was working half time as a as a marriage and family therapist and half time writing these stories. So I was sort of split between those two things. So yeah, I got to work with some amazing couples and families in that time, and definitely got a appreciation for how difficult that can be for the family when deployments come up, and just all the issues that go around that, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Thor, we're going to take a break here, and we're going to get a word from our sponsor, so everybody stay tuned. We got some here later on in the episode, Thor. I'm going to have Thor read a couple of the veteran stories that were approved, and so just stay tuned, and we'll be right back with you after commercials.
So put your weapon next to mine. Put your weapon next to mine.
You're listening to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Hey, right on down the line. Come on over. Come on over. What's not over?
My father was the best truck driver I've ever known in my life. Like a family tradition.
I'm a truck driver myself. I drove around the state with my cat.
To be the truck driver, you not just only see where you go, you see the world in the larger perspective.
This is a really good time to be in the trucking industry. The dispatchers get good loads for them. The equipment is very new, and then it's very reliable.
At GTS Transportation, we make dreams come true by employing truck drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and many other occupations. Consider joining our rapidly expanding team where we put quality, human dignity, and respect back into the workforce. Contact us by visiting our website at gtscarrier.com or call us at 847-754-4667. That number again, 847-754-4667.
Dallas Corporation and Dallas Logistics, a proud supporter of the Veterans Radio broadcast for over 15 years. High-quality printing services and warehouse distribution have been our hallmark since 1985, serving Fortune 100 companies for over 35 years. Check us out at www.dallascorp.com.
VBN, Veterans Broadcast Network, brings you Wounded But Not Broken, hosted by Patrick Scroggin. It lies within you to conquer your greatest challenges. Patrick tackles the stories of how others faced unthinkable odds, and then at a pivotal moment, a change occurred within them that gave them the strength, attitude, and direction to excel beyond the greatest expectations. Listen every week and learn how it is possible to defeat the impossible.
Welcome back to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We're here with Thor Ringler. We're talking about a program that was that he was a part of getting started. It's called My Life, My Story. It's where a veteran can tell his story, and it goes in his packet, and it makes everything more personal with his doctors and his healthcare providers. And it's such a great program that they've started. And Thor, so why do you think this is such a great hit? Why do you think it's working so well? Do you think it has any kind of therapeutic qualities for veterans, or does it help them tell their stories to other people and get it out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really true. I mean, I definitely just having been an interviewer for hundreds of interviews, and just I think being in that space and being able to talk to someone in a safe place where you're not like giving them a survey or a questionnaire. You're just asking them genuine questions about them and what their life's been like. It creates a space where they can share, and a lot of times they end up sharing things that they might not have shared with their family before. And so for them, for some of them, I think it's a way to share things with their family that they wouldn't be able to do face to face. Because I think everybody probably understands that when you're talking to loved ones about something that's difficult, it's hard, and sometimes having a story there, that's already written is an easier way to do that. So I think it definitely has that effect on veterans and their families, and so I think there's definitely a therapeutic part of it, I would say.
Right. Yeah, I think for the families, they probably benefit the most. Just from my experience, I think with the older generation, World War II and Vietnam, a lot of them guys didn't like to talk about what they'd went through and what they'd seen. And I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of, obviously it's a lack of support, but I think it's just the lack of awareness by our government and by the healthcare providers that there was actually, the things that they did and saw actually really affected them. And I just don't think they really dove into that problem at that point. And I know I've been a part of talking to a couple of World War II veterans to where they opened up to me and their families had never heard any of it. And, and their families would be in tears. And I think their families, it's such a great therapeutic thing for them because they can actually figure out what their grandfather or father had actually went through because he never talked about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's so important to be able to offer people opportunities to do that. So,
yeah. So, have any of these stories? Have they ever given any authors or anybody idea for books, or have they ever been used in any kind of movie roles or anything like that?
Not so far. No, there's definitely stories that could be movies. I'm sure of that. Yeah, we haven't really gone that far, with getting the stories out there. I mean, I think one important thing, is, we do ask veterans afterwards, if they'd be willing to share, share their story outside the medical record and, outside their family. And if a veteran's interested in doing that, he or she can sign a consent form, and then we de-identify the story and share the story. And so, like the stories I'll read today will be stories like that. And we do have a podcast series where we have some of the stories where veterans consented to share them being read by professional readers, and so that's up too. But we haven't got anything on the web yet. My goal is eventually to get the stories that are okay to share up on a website where people could look at them and read them because they're absolutely amazing. So yeah.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, there's thousands of stories out there that are just mind blowing, and that's kind of my motivation for this. After being talking with some World War II Vietnam vets that didn't get to tell their stories and never would, all my friends and the people that I know, I want to make sure that their stories get told because it's such an important part of our history. I mean, somebody can always learn something from what these guys have been through, and or somebody can be touched. It could change lives. It could save lives, and I don't know. It's just super important to me. What about when you interview soldiers that have security clearance concerns or sensitive information? I'm sure that's looked upon in some way or somehow.
Yeah, I think for the most part, they identify that and let us know that I can't talk about this, or if they do sometimes people will say, well, I'll say this, but I don't want it in the story, so then we just don't put it in there. But yeah, that's how we handle that, and because of the review process, and they get to read it over again, so there's that sort of second look at it to make sure that everything's that they're not releasing any kind of information that they shouldn't be. So yeah.
Right. So have you personally seen this change the way healthcare is provided, or have you seen that more personal connection by the doctor or the nurses reading these stories before they see the veterans? Have you witnessed that change?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories from individual providers about how stories have been able, first of all, just to change the way they've connected with a veteran and been able to have a totally different kind of conversation with them about their health and what's going on with them health-wise. And sometimes that's just a really strong point of connection. The story itself is a way to connect. There was one story. I just found out about this last. I think it was like a month ago, and I didn't even know this. There was a veteran who was being seen in the renal clinic at Madison, and he, I think, had high blood pressure for years and years, and wasn't responding to medication, and nothing would make it go down. And then he participated in my story, told his doctors that he had, and shared the story with them, and then his blood pressure went down. And it's just because he had shared a story and he needed to do that, and that in itself was enough to make him go to regular blood pressure levels just from doing that. So that's kind of a dramatic example, but I didn't even hear that till like a month ago. So it actually does have impact like that too. And then I think just ways of inspiring veterans too. I've heard this a lot. The story is there's a lot of there's the good and the bad, and a lot of times, especially in mental health, I think the psychologists or the psychiatrists, the social workers are able to look at these stories and see, oh wow, look at what you did here. This is amazing. Remember, like how strong you were when you did this, or look at, and so they're able to use them to like build people's confidence and remind them of what they can achieve and who they are. So I think there's that part of it too.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because I think for at least the friends that I know that it always helps to get everything, off your chest. You want to talk about it. We as humans, we want to communicate. We're social creatures, right? And so I think, but on the other hand, like my story, it's just a story to me. I mean, I look at it and people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what you went through, what you overcame. But for me, I can't see it any other way. It's just normal to me, because I couldn't see anybody not doing what I did, Right. So, right. But to have a third party look at it and then just kind of be like, oh my gosh, I'm sure that's pretty impactful.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Patrick, is that I think there's people who have told their stories a lot, and processed it, and so it becomes a part of how they talk to people, and they're comfortable sharing it. But there's other people like the World War II veterans you were talking about, or Vietnam era. It's the same thing, where there's a lot of reluctance to talk about those things, and so for those eras of veterans of talking with them, it's a very emotional and powerful thing to be able to share that for the first time, and to share it with somebody else. And it really does release and change things in a big way for some people. So
yeah, I bet it does. So are most of these interviews done in person, or do you do them over the phone or Skype or however they do it?
Great. Well, we were, so I would say up until COVID, we were pretty much in person as much as we could be. So we'd either stop by people's rooms in the hospital and interview them there, or set up appointments where folks would come in and we'd interview them like in an office. But since COVID, we've had to switch to to phone and to video when we can. So we've been doing a lot more of those, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy how much that's changed, huh?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
So is there? Can you think of a couple times, maybe some stories that you've heard that have impacted your life in a positive way, and how?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like particular ones. They're all amazing. I mean, if I think about like times where the interview, I'd say probably is the thing that really affected me the most, and then the interviews that I've been in on, and as you said before, some of them are very intense emotionally, and you feel like I guess just honored and kind of in a, I don't know, that's maybe the right way to say it, but kind of in a sacred space when you're with someone who's telling you something that's that important. And so I think interviews like that have really impacted me, and really I don't know, I just feel so grateful that I'm able to be there in that space. I mean, I think one in particular I remember, this was early on when I first started, and I was pretty shocked. I must admit I was pretty shocked when I started, because I didn't think that people were going to share as much as they did, or as deeply as they did. And I remember I think one of the stories I'll read, this big Vietnam Marine guy, he was in his bed, and he told the story of being in Vietnam and coming back, and then having family troubles with his wife, and just all this relational stuff. And he was like this really tough guy, but he was also just a very gentle guy at the same time. And I remember at the end of the interview, he was sitting up, and he finished, and I suddenly just reached over and I touched his arm. I just held his arm, because I just wanted to let him know that I had heard him and that I was there and that I really was. It was just so important for me to hear that, and I didn't even think about doing it, and I think that was the moment when I realized, wow, this is really not just like therapy. This is like person to person in some way, in some really amazing way. So.
Right. Man, thanks for sharing that. All right, we're going to take another break and get a word from our sponsors. When we come back, the next segment, Thor is going to read one of the stories. We have 2 more segments left. He's going to read a story in each segment. So when we come back, stay tuned. You all want to hear this.
Put your weapon next to mine. Put your weapon next to mine.
You're listening to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Hey, right on down the line. Come on over. Come.
Attention, looking for semi-drivers nationwide. GTS Transportation of Burr Ridge, Illinois is looking to hire or partner with experienced CDL holders in every state. If you are going to drive, why not drive for the best? Whether you are driving solo, as a team, or as an owner-operator, GTS is looking to add you to their rapidly growing company. Become part of one of the most respected, driver-friendly, and successful transportation companies in America, where drivers are treated as royalty. Contact us at gtscarrier.com. Again, gtscarrier.com. Or call us at 847-754-4667. That number again, 847-754-4667. We would love to help you, which in turn helps everyone. GTS is an equal opportunity employer.
Dallas Corporation and Dallas Logistics, a proud supporter of the Veterans Radio broadcast for over 15 years. High-quality printing services and warehouse distribution have been our hallmark since 1985, serving Fortune 100 companies for over 35 years. Check us out at www.dallascorp.com.
VBN, Veterans Broadcast Network, brings you Wounded But Not Broken, hosted by Patrick Scroggin. It lies within you to conquer your greatest challenges. Patrick tackles the stories of how others faced unthinkable odds, and then at a pivotal moment, a change occurred within them that gave them the strength, attitude, and direction to excel beyond the greatest expectations. Listen every week and learn how it is possible to defeat the impossible.
Welcome back to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Glad to be back talking. And I just learning of this, my life, my story. It's the first time I've heard of in the VA, and I think it's an amazing thing that they're doing. To get that personal connection between the healthcare providers and the veteran, and also therapeutic for the veteran. So, Thor, if you would go ahead and if you want to start and you want to read that first story that you have, I'd love to listen to it.
Okay, thanks a lot. Veteran's name is Joe. My younger brother died a couple years ago. I still miss him. He was my only sibling, and he went kind of crazy when his wife left him. Felt like he was trying to kill himself. He smoked 5 packs of cigarettes a day and drank more than you can imagine. We always had an intense relationship. Once we fought after his wife died and didn't speak for a year. I was the one who broke the ice and started talking again. I was always the peacekeeper in my family. My parents divorced when I was 13. My dad was an alcoholic, and my mom left him. He eventually got sober and wanted to get back together. The poor guy still loved her. I pretty much learned to grow up young. I enlisted in the Marines in 1967. I thought it was the right thing to do. I did my basic in San Diego. Marine boot camp was just like you see in the movies, only harder. We started out as individuals and ended up together. You cover my back, I'll cover yours. That's how it works. My training was for infantry, a ground pounder, a killer, one of the real bright people. I arrived in Vietnam late in 1967. My first assignment was Da Nang Air Force Base, and I was temporarily assigned to MP duties. For 2 months, I was in charge of patrolling the base. When I had the opportunity to get back into the infantry, I jumped on it. I was in the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, and we moved around a lot. We fought in Con Thien, Phu Bai, and even in the DMZ. We lost a lot of people. At one point, our company was down from the 500 guys I started with to just 100 of them left. I didn't get injured. I did get a hearing concussion from an explosion and was bleeding out of both ears. It was rough at times, but I just kept going. When times get bad, you still bend over and pull up your socks. My tour in Vietnam lasted 13 months. I was shipped back to California, Camp Pendleton, and taught other people how to do it. I still get flashbacks at night, maybe once a month. I live out in the country, and I've been known to get up at night, grab a deer rifle, run outside, and start shooting at the trees. I'd snap out of it after a couple minutes and find myself outside in the snow. It's definitely better now than in the past. I'm able to wake up and calm myself down. I got married in 1968 while I was still in the Marines. I was just back from Vietnam. It was rough the first 3 or 4 years. You didn't want to wake me or startle me. On our honeymoon night, my wife touched me while I was sleeping. The next thing I remember, and I was choking her. She learned to keep her distance while I was sleeping. We were married for 20 years and had 3 kids. We saw a counselor at the end, but it was too late. She had already made up her mind to leave. We worked hard, though, to not let it affect our kids. I think I learned from my own parents' divorce that it doesn't do the kids any good when parents fight with each other. There are enough negatives in life. You don't need to go out and look for them. I'm here in the hospital because my sodium levels are too low. The doctors think it may have caused the stroke I had last year. It happened while I was camping. I had a seizure and another seizure after they got me in the ambulance. Then I had a stroke while they were getting me out of the ambulance. I woke up 2 days later in the hospital with the right side of my tongue chewed off. I had bitten it during the seizures. A couple months ago, I discovered a lump under my right arm, and they removed a tissue sample yesterday. I should know in a couple days whether it's benign or not. My mom died of cancer. I stopped smoking 15 years ago when my sister-in-law was diagnosed with it. I don't care to be unhappy. I just keep going. I'd rather be laughing than frowning. I'm proud of my military service. It didn't give me any skills that I could use when I got back to civilian life. I sometimes think that we killed off their people and our people for nothing. But I would sign up again today and do the same thing if I had the chance.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
What,
you go ahead.
How many times have you been interviewed, Tor?
Have I been interviewed?
Program? Yeah.
Oh, I've been interviewed on, like podcasts and stuff like that. I've never been interviewed on the radio, actually. So.
Oh, okay. So when you hear these stories and doctors hear these stories, do you think it helps them maybe even to look into PTSD? Because it wasn't until recently, I know my era, where PTSD became like a super big issue, to where they really started looking for it and trying to dive in and figure out the causes of it and stuff. Do you think that helps doctors and medical providers too?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think there's people who, are, might already be getting treatment at VA or somewhere, for PTSD. But there's also people who don't even know they have it, not even sure what it is. And so I think, I think for a provider reading some of these stories, they'd be like, oh, that might be what this is, and I think, so I do think it can have that, it can have that function of like, oh, you might have this, maybe we should think about that. So yeah, I definitely think that can happen. Yeah, especially with, I think, like you said, like Vietnam and earlier, I think, the awareness of that was just so much lower that people didn't even have a name for it. So.
I don't, I think now, it's a lot more recognizable.
Yep.
And it's definitely, it's on the charts up there, in the red of
Yep.
we need to look for this. But how many people do you think, and I know this is going to be hard to answer, but how many people do you think that you've interviewed that had PTSD, maybe even severe PTSD, but didn't know it?
I would say probably for if you're looking back and thinking about like sort of World War II and Korea and Vietnam, I'd say a fair percentage of the people. I'd say of people who've been in combat and had traumatic experiences, I'd say probably like a quarter of them, maybe more, didn't identify that as something that was going on.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of safe to say. I mean, obviously, I am not a healthcare provider by any means, but just from my experiences and the people that I know, I mean, the things that soldiers are subject to and the things they do, I would almost say it's for everybody that's in combat. You have some level of PTSD if you do the things that we've done and seen the things that we've seen. Would you agree that some people handle it differently than others, maybe better or worse, or it just seems like it's such a broad thing, PTSD, that I have friends that Navy SEALs and Special Forces guys, and that have seen the most tremendous things on earth, and they're able to deal with it in some way or fashion, and some people just can't.
Yeah.
Do you run into that a lot?
Yeah, no, I think what you said is really true. I mean, I would agree with you that if you not having been in that situation myself, but from the people I've talked with, that I think serving in combat and seeing the things that you see and experiencing the things that you experience is a traumatizing thing, and changes you. And most of these stories talk about that. But I also think like you said, there's people who seem to be, less impacted by it long term than others. I'm not, and I know, and I don't think they really understand why that is. I've never really seen any explanation for why two people could go through the same type of experience, and one would be what's the word, damaged or injured by it, emotionally, and the other person not. And so it's really kind of a mystery.
Right. Yeah, I think I often say that because people ask me how I've dealt with the things that I've dealt with and seen and all that stuff, as well as I have it. And the best thing that I could come up with, and obviously it's just an opinion, but I think it's a mindset when you go into the military. I think I chose to go into the military in a time of combat to go to combat. I mean, that's why I did it. I wanted to go help fight for this country. And, and then not that everybody doesn't. I think it was just my mindset. No, I was mentally prepared for what I was going to have to do, what I was going to see. I think, at least in my own mind, I'm not saying that I don't have PTSD. I know I do, but I know what triggers it, and I know how to deal with it.
Right.
But I think it's a mindset.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely sounds right what you're saying. I mean, I think, I do think there's a difference between, choosing something that will probably be traumatic and experiencing something traumatic that's unexpected. I mean, I think I think your mind and your sort of spirit has a way of preparing you in some way. You know what you're going into, and I think I think if you don't expect that or going into it with different expectations, when something happens, it can really unsettle you in almost permanent ways sometimes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that's spot on. All right, we're going to take another break here and a word from our sponsors, and when we come back, Thor's going to read another story to us that's hopefully just as touching as the last. So we'll be right back.
So put your weapon next to mine. Put your weapon next to mine.
You're listening to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Hey, right on down the line. Come on over. Come on over. What's not over?
My father was the best truck driver I've ever known in my life, like a family tradition.
I'm a truck driver myself. I drove around the state with my cat.
To be the truck driver, you not just only see where you go, you see the world in the larger perspective.
This is a really good time to be in the trucking industry. The dispatchers get good loads for them. The equipment is very new, and then it's very reliable.
At GTS Transportation, we make dreams come true by employing truck drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and many other occupations. Consider joining our rapidly expanding team where we put quality, human dignity, and respect back into the workforce. Contact us by visiting our website at gtscarrier.com or call us at 847-754-4667. That number again, 847-754-4667.
Dallas Corporation and Dallas Logistics, a proud supporter of the Veterans Radio broadcast for over 15 years. High-quality printing services and warehouse distribution have been our hallmark since 1985, serving Fortune 100 companies for over 35 years. Check us out at www.dallascorp.com.
VBN, Veterans Broadcast Network, brings you Wounded But Not Broken, hosted by Patrick Scroggin. It lies within you to conquer your greatest challenges. Patrick tackles the stories of how others faced unthinkable odds, and then at a pivotal moment, a change occurred within them that gave them the strength, attitude, and direction to excel beyond the greatest expectations. Listen every week and learn how it is possible to defeat the impossible.
Welcome back to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm not going to say a lot. I want Thor to get right into this next story. There's a couple more questions I have after he reads it. So, Thor, if you're ready with this next one, go ahead.
You bet. Thanks. Yeah, Jess. My mom and dad separated when I was 3 and got divorced when I was 5. My dad wasn't really a part of my childhood, but my mom has always been about the best mom she could be. She wasn't around as much as other moms, but she didn't have a choice about that. She worked hard to support my brother and I, and always had 2 or 3 jobs. I loved school and was always really good at it. A week before graduating high school, a semester early, I ran into a recruiter in the counseling office. He offered me a $10,000 sign-on bonus and an opportunity to attend college if I joined the Army National Guard. I had never thought about joining the military before, but it suddenly seemed like the best solution. I was 17, and my mom had to sign the papers to allow me to join. I had my basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Basic was intimidating and scary. I started having some physical problems and went to see the sick call doctor on the base. He sexually assaulted me during the physical evaluation. Luckily, he left marks on me, and I hit him and left marks on him. When I was able to escape, I ran back to the bay where we were stationed and hid in the bathroom. I was missing half my layers of clothing and my shoes. My battle buddy came looking for me, found me, and I told her what happened. She told the drill sergeant when it happened. He asked me, "Where were you, Sullivan?" I told him, "I was at sick call, Sergeant," and he took off running. When I got to sick call, there was my drill sergeant on top of the guy, beating the shit out of him. After the assault, they asked me if I wanted to get out of the military. I said, "If I can get through what just happened, I can handle the rest of boot camp." My battle buddy was from Wisconsin like me, and she had been assaulted in a less violent way by the same guy. We became best friends and went to AIT training together. I realized during that time that I was a stubborn individual. I knew there were people who thought I couldn't do it, and I was going to prove them wrong. I graduated from basic training, and my dad and his dad attended the ceremony. It's the only time I've ever seen my dad cry. After I got through my training, I came back to Wisconsin and went back to school. During that first semester, I got called back to Fort Jackson to testify against my assaulter. At the court-martial, I had to bring up all the memories of what had happened. I missed a lot of school, and this affected my grades. It was extremely stressful. In June of 2006, I got the phone call, "You are now being activated." I had 10 days to get ready before deployment, and I had to get a lot done. I was about to buy a condo, so I backed out on that. I sold my car because I didn't know what to do with it. 4 or 5 days later, they called and told me I wasn't deploying. I ended up calling my commander and told him respectfully that I really needed to go. My stubbornness paid off. They put me back on the list for deployment. I served in the Army in Kosovo for 16 months. During my time in the military, every single female was sexually harassed in some way. I was tasked with taking care of EO, equal opportunity, for my unit, which meant a lot of rapes were reported to me. When I would pass them up the chain of command, nothing would ever happen. I would get punished for speaking out and vocalizing my issues with the chain of command. As a female in the military, it seemed like you could only choose one of 3 roles: the bitch, the slut, or the lesbian, and it didn't matter which one you chose. You were punished and treated like shit for all 3. I came back from Kosovo in the fall of 2007 and went back to college. I started processing the emotions that I wasn't able to let myself feel when I was deployed. My grades dropped. I started sleeping 20 hours a day. I didn't know that's what was happening. I just knew that I was in trouble. I wanted to kill myself. I just wanted to die. Luckily, I was living a short distance from a VA hospital, and I started going there nightly to sit and feel safe. There was an on-call social worker there, and she would talk to me. It didn't really feel like therapy. She just let me talk. I'd come here and tell my story to her, over and over. She saved my life. I got my undergraduate degree in psychology and my master's degree in May of 2013. My goal was to get a job working for the VA, and I now work there as a counselor for other veterans. I know how important it is to have someone else who's been there too. I also know how long it can take to heal. Trauma isn't something you recover from in a 9 or 12-week program. It's something that can get better over time, but it's with you your whole life. You also need to be stubborn. The only reason I have a relationship with my dad now is because I wanted to have that. For years, I just hated him. I stayed away and had nothing to do with him. I started reaching out when I was in high school, but it was me who made it happen. I lost someone in Kosovo, someone really near to me. He was my sergeant major, and he was old enough to be my dad, maybe even my grandpa. He had daughters my age, and we would sit and talk about them for hours. In the beginning of our deployment, he didn't have any pictures of them. At my request, he brought back pictures of them when he went on leave, and I got to see his beautiful wife and 2 daughters. I was the one who packed up his belongings after his death and sent them on back to his family. I helped load his body onto the airplane to go home. You can't imagine the emotions that go through you at a military funeral. They play taps, one of our own female soldiers saying Amazing Grace and the national anthem, and there's roll call. They read out the names of everyone in the unit, and everyone says, "Present," when their name is called. But this roll call can't be completed because someone isn't there. They get to his name, and instead of someone answering back, there is silence. They call his name again, and there's silence again. They call his name a 3rd time, and again, there's nothing. There's a minute of silence, and then the guns start firing. It's an indescribable feeling. It goes through your chest and your stomach. There's nothing like sending a body home.
Wow. That's, I can contest to that. I was at OIC for a funeral detail, and I'll tell you what, it's probably the proudest I'd ever been to take part in that. It's such an honor, and that's the way I looked at it, because that was the last honor to pay the family after getting the worst news on earth, that they lose a family member. And so I know that's one thing I took very seriously. It was very touching. So the last segment, sorry, that was a pretty powerful story for me, actually.
It's a really powerful story. Yeah, no, I get pretty emotional when I read it, actually. So, yeah.
The last, right before we cut off, you talked about soldiers, the expectations of everybody's expectations are a little bit different, and that's how it kind of affects. And so I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that was a very, very good way to explain it, because, when I got hurt, every expectation I had from my life from there on out had changed, overnight, and I had no control over that. And so laying in bed in a full body cast, hearing everybody telling me what I could and couldn't do, it's so powerful for me. I mean, it affected me so badly, and I got super depressed, and I laid there in my somber, and the one thing, it always just takes one thing. The one thing that snapped me out of it and made me stand up like a man again was seeing the burn patient that I talk about in my story. He was burnt 98% of his body, and I felt so terrible about how I was laying around feeling sorry, because at the end of the day, comparatively speaking, I wasn't hurt that bad, and so that was such a big moment for me, and that's really what motivated me to slingshot forward in life, of try to accomplish as much as I possibly could. So it's man, that's such a, I don't know, this is, like I said, this, I hadn't heard about this before. This is my life, my story, and I think it's an awesome thing you have going. And is it accepted by all the VAs, or is it just a select few?
So right now it's at like over 50 VAs have it now across the country, and it's sort of like scattered. So I think what we're going to be doing this year is try to introduce it to more VAs, and by having doing more of the interviews remotely, so doing them over like Zoom or something like that, or the phone, because we have a lot of volunteers and people who are trained to do it, and so this year we're going to expand it to more VAs, and people are going to be able to do the interviews remotely if they want to, because there's a lot of VAs that would like to do the program but just haven't committed to it yet, don't have the staffing for it. So I would say over the next 5 years, the goal is to get this at every VA and make it available to everybody, everybody who wants to do it, of course.
Right. No, I think it's a great program, and I don't know what little I could do, but if I could ever do anything to help, I sure would do it. I sure would be behind it.
Okay, yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, spreading awareness is great, and I'm really just so happy that you had me on the show to talk about it, because it's
Oh no, I really appreciate it. So we got a little bit of time left, just a few minutes, but I wanted to. Are you aware of the operator syndrome, as they call it?
I think I've heard about it. I think just recently. Yeah, could you maybe explain it a little bit? I just read about it, I think, a couple of weeks ago, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically, I mean, I don't have the book definition, but the accumulation of like psychological, neutral, and all being an operator, or even you can just say being a soldier, right? You go to war, you're living on adrenaline for 6 to 8 months, and you come with the physical demands that takes on your body, and then you come home, and that's when like a lot of these problems start to come out. And is that something that the VA is going to concentrate on, or because I know a lot of soldiers come home and trying to replace that adrenaline from combat, and they either get depressed and as you know, our suicide rate is through the roof. They either get depressed and commit suicide, or they kill themselves on a motorcycle or something trying to replace that.
Right.
Is that something that you've heard that's going to be tackled into the VA?
I haven't actually heard about it yet. I think I would, but you bring up a really good point, though. I think because I think a lot of times, if I think the issue is kind of like a healthcare system, right? Is it's always like responding to problems that are like the biggest ones, instead of like working to prevent them from getting worse, And so in some ways, I mean, I just think it's really interesting what you're talking about, because I think if there was a way that they started, if you started thinking about, well, how do we keep people from getting worse? How do we help them make that adjustment? What is the way to do that? I mean, I think that's really something that we should be doing, and not just waiting until people are diagnosed with severe PTSD and having those kinds of and having the issues that go along with that.
Right.
I don't know what that is, but I totally agree with you that I think sort of almost like preventative medicine. I don't want to say it that way, but I mean, being aware that these things happen and taking them more seriously early on,
it's just a simple fact of being proactive as instead of reactive.
Totally. I think that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Thor, I really want to thank you for your time and explaining this. I'm really going to dig in. I want to do some more research on it, and I want to stay in touch. In any way I can ever help, I would be more than happy to. I'd be honored to be a part of it for anything that I could do. But thanks for your time tonight, and just appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Patrick. I really enjoyed being on the show, and you had great questions, and thanks for having me on. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And there, all the listeners, I want to thank you all for tuning in, and I want to encourage you to tune in next week. We're going to have another great story, and thanks for everything you do, and just remember to thank a veteran, and God bless America. Thank you. God bless our veterans.
You're listening to Wounded But Not Broken with host Patrick Scroggins.
Attention, looking for semi-drivers nationwide. GTS Transportation of Burr Ridge, Illinois is looking to hire or partner with experienced CDL holders in every state. If you are going to drive, why not drive for the best? Whether you are driving solo, as a team, or as an owner-operator, GTS is looking to add you to their rapidly growing company. Become part of one of the most respected, driver-friendly, and successful transportation companies in America, where drivers are treated as royalty. Contact us at gtscarrier.com. Again, gtscarrier.com. Or call us at 847-754-4667. That number again, 847-754-4667. We would love to help you, which in turn helps everyone. GTS is an equal opportunity employer.
Dallas Corporation and Dallas Logistics, a proud supporter of the Veterans Radio broadcast for over 15 years. High-quality printing services and warehouse distribution have been our hallmark since 1985, serving Fortune 100 companies for over 35 years. Check us out at www.dallascorp.com.
VBN, Veterans Broadcast Network, brings you Wounded But Not Broken, hosted by Patrick Scroggins. It lies within you to conquer your greatest challenges. Patrick tackles the stories of how others faced unthinkable odds, and then at a pivotal moment, a change occurred within them that gave them the strength, attitude, and direction to excel beyond the greatest expectations. Listen every week and learn how it is possible to defeat the impossible.